10 seconds twice a month.
Plus, I'm getting a good back and forth. We got like a rapport going.
My God, we're hitting this hot. We're hitting this one hot.
You know what? Here's the thing.
I'm ready.
I drank a little caffeine this morning.
Oh, man.
And you know me, I'm an anti-no caffeine guy.
Yeah. I'm getting A+ today. That's what I'm getting.
My body is a temple.
And, mine is not. Mine is more of a junkyard. Speaking of junkyards, I've never seen this movie that you brought up before.
That's true.
This morning.
You're a junkyard of a movie viewer. That's a good segue.
Thank you. I'd never seen this movie before 9 o'clock this morning.
That is insanity to me.
I know.
What's going on?
What? I'll tell you what's going on. This came out in 1993, and I was raised in a conservative home, and so I couldn't watch it. I couldn't watch it. And then by the time I was old enough to watch these kind of movies, it wasn't really around anymore.
It
wasn't really a thing at that point.
Here's the thing about Demolition Man is that it's surprising in its legacy.
Yes, I agree.
Because it is not a good enough. I mean, I'm going to make an argument today about it is a good film, which we all know.
Wow.
We're just doing whatever. But its legacy, like I would say that it's like not a movie we needed. That's probably a fine statement.
Definitely not.
Yet its relevance keeps coming back time and time again. I mean, there's like Gattaca, there's like higher art. It's kind of what this show is about, right? Like there's some things that were like Demolition Man, fucking let's go. Other times it's like Gattaca. I guess we could talk about Gattaca. Is Gattaca too like high art? I don't know.
No. Gattaca fits here.
I don't know. We'll see.
I think it fits.
The ongoing conversation of what the show is about is what you're hearing, dear reader.
If you guys don't know, just rest assured, neither do we.
Neither do we.
We also don't know.
Yeah.
Can I just share very quickly at the outset?
Yeah, please. This is more interesting. Tell me your initial opinions of Demolition Man, you maniac.
My God. This film. Okay, so I don't want to say anything about your thesis, but it seemed like it was trying very hard to be a Paul Verhoeven film. Like it really wanted to be a Paul Verhoeven film. Like I feel like that was it definitely isn't. That's the first thing. The second thing is it had a bigger budget than Jurassic Park and then Schindler's List, both of which came out the same year.
Yeah, that
Can you
sounds
believe that?
impressive. That sounds impressive, but let's act like we don't know. Like, let's act like Spielberg isn't fucking got that shit on lock. He's just amazing at that.
Right.
So if he's the data point, it's a little skewed. But you're absolutely right. Holy shit.
I guess that's true because it's Spielberg. It actually works against the argument that that's an insane thing. But it's still pretty crazy.
Its budget is also widely variant. Did you notice that? I read multiple.
Yeah,
45 to 77 is what's on Wikipedia right now.
Yeah.
And after initial research, like, I think the reason that they have that wide variety is on promotional materials because they spent so much money on just advertising this shit. Making sure that it was like the hit of the summer. I don't even know. No, it came out in October. But like,
I remember
it.
Really, I remember the ads for it.
There was
like
build up. There's posters and shit like that back in the day, and it wasn't really as calculated as it was, let's say, now. But so that's one reason for inflation. The other reason is actual inflation. But if you look at movies like recently, it's like, 45 million, whatever. That sounds like. What? That doesn't matter. 77 million? Still like, what? Really?
They didn't make movies for that expensive back then. Like, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves was famously the biggest budget of all time. And it was around that time, right? It was like a year or two later, and it wasn't a lot more money.
I should know this because you have a video games podcast. You ever play Katamari Damacy?
I have not played that.
That's the one where you roll the ball, and you just keep rolling, and you get little bit by bit by bit by bit until you're a big ball, and that's the end of the game.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't played it, no.
Yeah, it's just snowball effect the game. And that's what's happening with our movie industry. You know,
Not now.
Well, not now. Nothing's happening now. But
I think this is the great reckoning for the cost of making movies and for theaters. But I don't want to digress too much. Can I give you one other observation before you launch into
Demolition Man will save us. Yes, please.
I got news for you. No, it can't. It cannot. So I have only seen, I want to say, like 4 or 5 Wesley Snipes films. Like, I haven't seen that many Wesley Snipes films. U.S. Marshals, I know. U.S. Marshals I've seen. I saw Blade way back when. And he's in White Man Can't Jump, right? He's in White Man Can't Jump, right?
Yeah. With Woody.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Which I saw like when I was like 11. I snuck into my friend's like bedroom and watched it. I didn't have a lot of opinions about him. I got to tell you, I like him a lot more now that I've seen this movie. I was like, oh, this guy is great. He's having a much better movie than anybody else in this movie is having, I would argue.
It's surprising
and
to me.
Sandra Bullock is in it. Sandra Bullock's in this movie. What?
You're saying things like this is not aware, like we're not aware.
I couldn't believe that. I was like, what?
It's huge. It's like it's mainstay Bullock. You know, it's mainstay Stallone, man. It's like Rambo, Demolition Man, like probably Rambo, but still Demolition Man's up there. Like we're talking big hits. Demolition Man was a huge hit, and the box office says so at the time.
It didn't rank in the top 10 movies that year, did it? For box office? I don't think it did.
I thought it did. I thought it definitely. I know the story that it's like more of a cult kind of thing. But
I mean, that year had some fucking titans in it. It had, again, Schindler's List.
We're talking 90s. 90s is a different story.
Yeah, it had Jurassic Park in it.
Yeah.
You know, those are 2 huge movies. We're briefly gonna look this up because it's actually worth knowing.
That's
this.
Good.
Yeah. Indecent Proposal was a huge hit that year. Shocking. Cool Runnings, not so much. Mrs. Doubtfire came out that year, $400 million. Yeah. The Firm came out that year, $270 million, which was pretty awesome. Cliffhanger, also a Stallone joint, came out that year.
Dude, yeah.
Stallone, can you believe that shit? Cliffhanger's great. I mean, it's corny, but it's great.
It wasn't Demolition Man, though.
No. Sleepless in Seattle, $220 million. Philadelphia made $200 million in the box office. Can you believe that? In the Line of Fire, Dennis the Menace,
Tom Hanks,
Groundhog Day, and then Demolition Man is like the 12th movie or something.
Jesus.
Yeah,
what a
Last
great
Action
year
Hero right next to it.
For white people. You know?
Sure. Groundhog Day also, by the way, is sneaky like top 3 movie that year.
Oh, sneaky, like in terms of resonance with culture?
Yeah.
Get out of town. Yeah.
Well, I think you gotta go with Schindler's List and Jurassic Park, but after that, it's Groundhog Day and this old Bears.
Stevie's killing it, dude. Stevie's in the front seat, fucking driving. He's got the '90s on lock, dude. I don't like Michael Jordan, Steven Spielberg. That's who's got the keys.
I mean, okay, so obviously we don't want to devolve into Spielberg cast here, but like the story behind how he got to make Schindler's List deserves its own podcast somewhere because it's really cool.
Oof. Trust me, I'm a Spiel boy.
Anyway, I know you're a Spiel boy. I know. Anyway, I all of those movies happen at the same time as Demolition Man, and I've seen all those movies. And the last to fall, the last brick in the wall to finally come out, was Demolition Man for Adam Ganser.
Yeah, I love that you show you make a wartime dystopic image.
I did.
As you know, it's a good segue for I think today's topic, right?
I think so.
Shall we go?
Let's do it.
Okay, so today I want to talk about crafting Demolition Man's 2 worlds, because he very much so does, right?
Agreed.
And I want to talk about those worlds and why I think directorially it's interesting. And then I just kind of wanted to riff on some ideas with you about why the setup is kind of stupid.
Definitely.
But my thesis is more of like, here's some cool things I saw while looking at Demolition Man. And then also like, here's some weird things that like in terms of like structural narrative, that's weird, right?
Yes.
What does that say? So I just wanted to bring those up. So it's less of a like unified thesis, more of like, let's go Demolition Man. Let's knock this shit down. So if you haven't seen it, like pre 9 a.m. Adam Ganser, I just really quickly want to tell you what it's about, but also just real quickly tell you the elements I want to talk about today. So Demolition Man is a film with a very specifically anti-PC message, especially looking from the lens of 2020, correct? It damns the suggestion that like overt political correctness, or as Huxley says, which is played by Sandra Bullock, anything bad is illegal. You know, that kind of mantra has taken hold and squashed personal freedoms like swearing, smoking, sex, pooping with freedom, loving American-made toilet paper.
My God.
It's basically saying the antithesis to our world is not only like out of question, but laughable. And these elitists are saying that. And that's what's wrong with that world. So our possible future society is obtrusive, it's automated, and many of its people find it oppressive to the point of outright revolt. In the case of like Edgar Friendly, played by Dennis Leary, who is playing the revolutionary of the underground in that world.
In the movie.
Who's in the movie.
In the movie.
Absolutely. First role. Yeah.
This is like, this movie, if you haven't seen it, it could be a 2020 shitty Republican rebuttal to defunding the police. Like, it could easily be that, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. And other, even members of like the over society, the overworld, they find it oppressive, like this culture. At least Huxley does, in a way, in a fashion, because she just feels that there's like a joie de vivre hole in her heart. She kind of talks about how she likes the olden days kind of stuff. I'll talk more about that later.
Yeah.
So its solution is to send a renegade, even for our standards, cop, into this society and teach them that being a little rough, smoking, spitting, fucking, it's all a part of being human and we should savor it, and you just get out of here with your fancy computers, right? So that's John Spartan, right? That's Stallone.
Is just functionally, and I'm not trying to undermine you, is functionally this character, John Spartan, any different than Judge Dredd? Is he any different?
Yes.
Okay.
I do think so.
Okay, good.
Exactly on point, though. I think that the difference between those two characters is that I think that Dredd comes from a world where law and order is the only question. John Spartan is trying to appeal to a society where law and order has been solved, that there's more to life that you're missing out on. So I think it's actually that joie de vivre stuff that like Huxley's looking for. That is the difference between those two characters in particular. So then... Yeah,
that's interesting though, because you're sort of delineating them based on when in the oppression timeline they exist, not really based on what they do as people.
I think that's key
important
to my theory, because I think that these are philosophical arguments. So I'm going to deal with them in the realm of the philosophical.
Cool.
Although it's very... Feel free to just bring up cases at any time. Say, yeah, but in the movie this happens. I don't think I'm going to stray that far away into the weeds, but knock me down if you want.
I glanced in a more thorough way at this theory this time. After I watched Demolition Man, I had to know what in the hell we could possibly be talking about.
What are we going to talk about? Yeah,
I'm excited about this, so I don't want to derail it too much.
It's a house of cards, Adam Ganser. It can fall apart at any time.
Yeah.
Like your vocalist, Abe Epperson. All right, so then you have the number 3, the ultimate threat, Simon Phoenix. He's pure evil. They basically do a shit ton, way more work than they even need to show that it's pure evil. They even give us a readout that says like, and I wrote them down, but it's like, controlled substance theft, DUI, rape, murder, smuggling, like all the worst ones.
Yeah, a lot.
But it also includes like DUI and credit card fraud and tax evasion, which is hilarious considering who it is. Jury rigging. Like he's just all around, like he has control of the system in a way, and he's just doing crimes. Like... He's called a mastermind at one point. He's called the king of... he's called like the king of the Southern California crime, or king of LA crime, or something like that at one point.
He's basically the Joker, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of is.
That's I've read a lot of think pieces about that, and that's true. I think there is a nihilistic bend that he has on everything he does. Except I'm going to squash that because unless you think that he's just talking about randomness and has no point, which then I guess he's kind of the Joker. But even the Joker had a point. The Joker has a point of, I got to thwart Batman.
Yes.
Like, he's got a MO. And so you would be arguing that Phoenix has no MO over anything, but he does have a point where he does kind of say what his point, like why he's doing stuff.
I think Nolan had some insight into the truth about the Joker, which is the Joker is a reflection on it to everybody else. Like, hey, this is what you are.
Always.
Yeah, I think that was designed I think he brought that out. I think he brought that out in the way that he treated the character.
Right.
And I don't think Wesley Snipes' character is that.
I don't think he is. Yeah, but I think it's a valid theory. I'm just not going to talk about it.
That's okay. Fair enough.
He's also, they throw in there that he's racist. I just thought that was funny.
He really is. Oh my God.
He just throws some racist slurs around. Yeah.
Ooh. Also, I felt a little uncomfortable at times. Not a lot, just a little uncomfortable with the way he was treated as a character on the race issue. And I'll bring it up later.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's... I've read a few things that about it that I was like, yeah, that is true about the presentation, especially of a black man at this time.
Yeah. Just briefly, did they mention the fact that his outfit made him look like a football player? Was that a discussion point?
That wasn't in the one I read, but that's a great one. Yeah, there's at one point he does have shoulder pads. So does his cronies, but I mean, he's the one in the lights. He's being represented that way. I think there's something to be said about that. It's also post-apocalyptic.
Yes.
Like, if you think about Mad Max and stuff, they're wearing like shoulder pads and shit like that. He doesn't outright like play football or like, like have a jersey in the whole 9 yards. But yeah, it's true. There's those like black kind of spiky.
Yeah, I just found that connection to be uncomfortable, and it didn't seem like it was impossible for the filmmakers to have seen it at the time.
Yeah,
like I don't think it's being read in from the past, from the future. I think it's like, no, they could have seen that.
They could have seen that. Yeah. That's more than fair. So the way as the viewer are presented to Demolition Man, both worlds feel kind of foreign to us. That's one thing we gotta think about when we were talking about the past and the future in this movie. It was a pretty huge blockbuster, wasn't the biggest, as we talked about, but the studio ended up going up to $70 million. And this director, Marco Brambilla, who created like ads only. We were talking about Ridley Scott and Tony Scott the other day. Talk about like ad directors being ushered in, like an era that this not even happening anymore.
No,
it's just not happening. You have to make a feature yourself now. This old society of, he made like 200 ads. He was huge in ads, and he did like video art installations, and he was big on the tech of the day. And so everyone was just like basically met at a party, a few people who just made this happen. And that's Demolition Man. This guy had never directed anything, no features on his belt in terms of that. Granted, he was very, very well trained, and he had a very talented DP and costume designer, which is why, and the set deck is great. But there was a lot of fresh faces on set, and that's just something I wanted to notice, because, it's just good when we start talking about the nitty-gritty of the details. Remember who these people are and the craftsmen at work. These people, this is what you're walking into. It kind of new. There's a few aged, people who are, who are in their prime kind of situation, but you're at the helm of fairly new, a features a unique beast, and that's all I wish to say about that.
Do you think that's fair? Do you think that because I think that rating does matter, the fact that of his inexperience as a feature film director is obvious at times. For instance, all the acting is shoddy at points.
Yeah, sure.
And from actors who are not always bad, you know what I mean? Even Sandra Bullock has some lines that are ooh, that's a bad read. That shouldn't have been stuck in the edit. So there's that. But also, do you think that means that Sylvester Stallone has a lot of say over what this movie is?
I think Stallone has a lot of say over everything. Yeah. Stallone is right? I mean, he's well known for keeping his career close to his chest kind of thing. Because I was just reading it today, he was going to be the Beverly Hills Cop.
That's unbelievable.
You can't think of it like Beverly Hills Cop was like a thing that was like, it was a project that they wanted to do. There was a script. It was passed to him. He like rewrote it. And in the time, they just said Eddie Murphy. So it was like early days, but like it's just interesting that he does that. He has to take whatever comes to his desk and he's like, I see the point here. I'm going to do it my way. And that's just a part of working with Sly, you know?
I think so. So just briefly, and I know this is off topic, but you know, this is just fun. Mm-hmm. Do you think that he is the reason we have so much of naked Stallone in this movie in the ice freezing part? I can't say,
man. I don't know.
It feels very...
Who's going to talk about that shit? It could be.
Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, it feels very like, oh, he wanted to make his Terminator. Like, he may have thought this was his Terminator.
I think so. I mean, right? They're throwing... Arnold and Sly, this is prime, like, throwing trash talk at each other.
Yes,
because they have the Arnold Amendment, and, like, Sly gets like, you know, like, it's just like, this motherfucker keeps taking all the big hits.
Which was a good joke.
I think there was actually, like, beef there, because didn't Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, didn't he, like, convince him? Like, Arnold Schwarzenegger got him into, like, he was interested in the project, and then Stallone was like, oh, he's interested? Well, I'm interested. And then he just backed out, and then it totally bombed, and it was a trash movie. But, like, that's... And, like, Sly has, like, anger about that. True. I don't know. Look it up. I'm pretty sure I read that.
Playful.
I'm definitely sure I read that. I'm just pretty sure it's true.
Yeah. I mean, the same year Last Action Hero comes out, and in that movie... there's a version of the future, or a movie world where Stallone is the Terminator.
Right.
Same year.
Well, yeah.
Which is great, you know. Like
Arnold was always a bigger draw at this point. So.
Well, sure.
But
still,
I mean,
come on, still.
Roky's a better movie than any Schwarzenegger movie. To be honest with you.
I don't know. Terminator 2, baby. Terminator 2 is pretty good, dude. Terminator 2, I think matters more than Rocky. I'll go on record and say that.
I think you're probably right about that. All right, let's go.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, all right, sorry.
So let's talk about our two worlds and how our director covers it. So let's talk about the past, because up top we get about 7 minutes in screen time in LA 1996, and it's just an absolute battlefield. We only see like a district of LA. That's like our worldview. So we don't see anything extending that or like what the world's up to. But we do know that the police are completely militarized in LA, and crime is so out of hand that you see distant shots that like there's just fires for miles. You know, like every street is torched, derelict cars, the multiple buildings in the background are just on fire. It's just implying that this kind of local unruliness is rampant and like probably complex. Like that's what Demolition Man says is like, here's the now, here's the 3 years from now or whatever.
It looks like a junkyard. And also it looks like the future looks in Terminator. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, except more fires. Like it's like, also it's set 3 years from the moment this movie came out, which is very hard to understand.
So here's how,
it's like, what the fuck happened?
Here's how the director uses camera and lighting in that 7 minutes, is that the things that with my eye, I picked up on, is that almost everything must be on a long lens. Now, again, I think that's his ad background, you know, like I think that they shot ads at this time on long lenses. He's going to go to his familiar lens. So that could be one thing. But he chose it with this sequence in particular. Dutch angles are at least every minute. There's like 7 or 8 Dutch angles. Diagonal lines are really emphasized, and I got to shout out Die Hard for that kind of stuff. Like it basically for 7 minutes you feel like you're in a Die Hard. Flat angles are like up and down and almost not present. It's all diagonals, baby. Handheld is almost completely exclusive up to this point until the final talk between Simon and Spartan, which arguably makes up the most time. But all of the sequence building, like him getting off the helicopter and storming the place, shooting the guys, and when we return back, basically until he's put into cryogenesis again, it's basically handheld. And then the lighting, I wanted to make a note too. The lighting is less stark than we're going to see from the future. It's a pretty contrast heavy film in general, but there's more light sources here and they're more organic. Like if you look at the walls in this case, he used fire a lot, so there's like a living flicker in all the fill lights on the walls, and in general his color tones are warmer. They're like orange, reds, and yellows. And these are the kind of support lights that he used in this sequence. And I want to make...
And do you think it's because he had to shoot on location?
I think that was a bit of it. You kind of, right? You light the space you have, but he chose to just place like, oh, how do you want to light this when you're talking with your DP? Well, I think that there should just be like trash cans and barrels on fire everywhere. And that's what I'm getting production design to do. And then the DP is like, okay, I'm going to utilize that as my light source. That's the kind of conversations being had.
They shot a lot of stuff in this movie, like on location. I noticed because they shot a substantial couple of scenes in a building that was across from our old office, if you saw that.
Yeah, they did.
In the water park.
And good fucking use of the LA Convention Center, am I right?
Very much so, yeah. Which is to say that, like, so they're not building this dystopia. They're using an existing... Right, so they have to hide the actual building then. Mm-hmm. Right? Because they're not... I mean, if they're not going to build it, then they got to hide most of it to make it look this dystopic. It's a smart choice by a director, honestly.
Yeah.
Because, you're working with what you got. That's what he has to do.
Yeah. Basically, this basically is just Die Hard right now, without the lighting. Like, it really is. Like, the combo of camera tricks, let alone the production design elements, flow of the sequence, like the rhythm of the blocking and the movement of, like, your main character, the pacing, just the editorial presentation, so, like, the speed at which the edits happen. All that stuff, it just feels like Die Hard. I just wanted to mention that as a note, like the pervasiveness of Die Hard to the action genre.
Yes.
You look at Die Hard, look before it, not there. Like after it, it's everywhere.
This is very 80s inspired.
Yeah, it is.
Like
it's
everything
inspired
about
by the 80s, but it wasn't like I don't think that everything was like pointed out and said, okay, this is how you shoot this type of sequence. Until Die Hard.
Yes, I think that they're totally, and
only in that they're mimicking it literally with like the long lenses, the Dutch angles, the diagonal lines, the handheld.
Well, and contrast it with Last Action Hero, which definitely feels a lot more like 90s. Like it's definitely more in the present moment. I think again, it's like when you're a first-time director, you're afraid to take big, bold swings.
I think he's just putting on his McTiernan hat, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Good on him.
What's
he
wrong
did
with
a good
that?
job. He did a good job.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
So
it's pretty good.
Once Spartan has kind of been framed, Spartan being, of course, Sly. I don't think I mentioned that. We go to the cryo lab, which is shot exactly like a darker version of 2032, which is where the rest of the film happens. It's large vertical and horizontal lines. There's a lot of contrast work in these shots because you notice that they work with silhouettes that kind of place Stallone in cages. There's a big shot of vertical like slits against a wall, and he's walking through them. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, he's in a cage, got it. He's in prison. And then when you watch again, notice that the color cyan keeps coming up because that's just something that, like, Demolition Man is the color cyan. If you haven't noticed, it's every fucking scene.
Yeah.
There's something that is smart about doing that as a visual aesthetic is if you just pick something as simple as a color and say, this color, what does that color represent? You know what it represents is the movie. It's literally everywhere. It's the thing that makes it feel cohesive. And simple decisions like that. And then you're like, okay, so it's cyan. Okay, well, what do you want to do when you talk about the old world versus the new world? Well, I'm going to do a bunch of other stuff, but cyan's always there. And that's something that I think is pretty gray as well. But cyan, if there is a color, it's in that's what's big in this movie. I think.
Yeah, that was a great observation because I kind of noticed it, and then I read this, and then I went back and flipped through to see like how much cyan is there.
Yeah,
there is a lot.
There's a lot.
You can't believe how much there is.
And it's just basic color theory. It's really smart. It's something directors and production designers and the creative visual aesthetics of the film, the people who are discussing that, the palette of the film is really determined by like the creatives talking about these types of things, and someone in the room at one point said it's cyan, and that's a part of how this movie was made. It's also,
and this sounds dumb, but it's like it's just a choice that's the opposite of what you would expect, right? Mm-hmm. So like because they're using cyan to reinforce danger for the most part, right? Yeah. Which sort of links it to the freezing as like a punishment.
Exactly. Yeah,
which is smart. It's smart.
It's the thing that propels the movie forward. Like, what if we froze a bunch of guys? Like that's okay. Right. What's the color of freezing? I don't know, cyan. And so like that's basically why they chose that color, I think. And you're spot on that.
And instead of being hot for danger, right? And like, don't think that hot if you're like just for the audience, hot for danger. If you're the audience, it's like that sounds like what an obvious and basic decision for a director to make. Look, man, really good directors do this all the time. Yeah. Michael Mann did it in Heat.
Yeah.
The movie Heat is not warm, it's cold. It's a cold-colored movie because it's heat. It's like, whoa, dude.
Whoa.
And it looks fucking awesome. Yeah, you know what I mean? Whoa, man. Yeah, exactly.
So you're saying it's like it's not heat, but not? Damn.
Great movie, by the way. It's a really great movie, and like it's a simple decision, and it looks fucking great.
Yeah. Wes Anderson
these are the kind of tricks.
Gets all up in there and he's like, you know what, let's take like 8 colors and they're all like brown.
Could you make a color out of tape maybe and yarn? That's the color I'd like.
Could it be brown and yellow, please? Yeah, Wes. You got it.
Can you make me a twee 70s color, whatever that would be?
I want to see. Does he have a hot pink film? A neon pink film? I don't think he does.
Royal Tenenbaums has a lot more pink in it than you think.
It's got the twee pink. It's got like the pastel pink. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not hot pink. I think that's a little bold. Also,
that's the Wes Anderson movie. I want to see a punk Wes Anderson movie.
Ooh, Budapest Hotel, by the way, has a lot of pink in it too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's what he loves. He loves those pastels.
I don't know why I think it's funny that it's like, it's probably brown. That's not true. Colors, there's like so many colors. Why, Abe, why are you picking brown? I don't know. It's just when I see it, I think brown. That's all. I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about the future Demolition Man and how our directorial kind of strategy changes. You probably guessed the future is opposite of almost all those things I mentioned in the past. Generally, the future is presented as a reversal in movies of things that are where we're at. In this case, I'll talk about that later. All right, so let's talk about the nitty-gritty of the future. So scene work is almost entirely done on a wider lens. I think that that's informed by a lot of different things. I think we see a higher percentage of this movie, the shots that work inside the radius of the 180-degree line. So that's something I want to talk about. When you think about like the Coen brothers, or you think about like someone like Scorsese, they like to use wide-angle lenses and they like to shoot from inside the 180 line radius. And what that means to a casual viewer is that the 180 line, just real quick, is this invisible line between two subjects, and you always want to put camera on one side of it. If you don't, it looks not cohesive in the edit. So they do this as just kind of a like basics kind of thing. Now, you can choose to be on a longer lens and zoom in, let's say, and get an over-the-shoulder shot of someone like who that your subject is talking to, and they have now infringed into the frame, right? Or you can get closer than that subject is to the person is to your subject. You can get inside that radius and shoot very closely. Coen brothers, Scorsese. They don't like to shoot overs, for example, and one of the reasons is they like to keep camera real close to the subject. Now, from the difference between the 7 minutes that we saw and then let's say the 7 minutes that we see after is that almost all the scene work is entirely done on a wider lens and done in this fashion. So, this isn't as cut and dry in general because movies just have to work with their spaces, but you notice a very deliberate attempt in this movie all over to get closer to the characters from the get-go. Like one of the reasons that they may be forced to stay inside the line or stay inside the radius is like, I don't know, the location is, they're in a small space or something like that. Usually they can build a set to make it work, so they do, and it's very deliberate. There's Dutch angles are there only in Dennis Leary's Underground or Simon Phoenix fight sequences, which are like kind of mainstays of like, when you're gonna like do a fight, let's get kind of messy with it. So let's Dutch it, let's handheld it, let's do these kind of things that make it feel a little bit more energetic. So they do.
But to give it a little credit, though, both of those sequences you're discussing also imply a flashback from the previous world.
We're getting closer.
So there is a motif
We're
there.
getting closer.
You know?
Yeah, diagonal lines exist in the future, but flat angles like up, down, left, right are more emphasized. Handheld is only reserved for Simon Spartan fight sequences, with the one exception I'll mention later, which I think is poignant. Lighting is less stark, as I said before. It's a very artificial, like hard lines placed on background walls, and the contrast is like a way to break up that sterile, boring walls of concrete and steel that makes up these building spaces. In fact, there's a quote from, I actually found an interview with the director. He says, "I made it very clear from the beginning, with all the concept art and production design, that except for the underworld, that the world should be devoid of any grit or textures and be sanitized. As much as the dialogue in the film is very politically correct and the people behave in a certain way, the world itself needed to be absent of variety." So if the concept is to make everything sterile, how do you make it look interesting within that context? So we talked a lot about using hard light sources and giving pristine things an organic quality with color. We used a lot of cyan and blue and different color combinations to bring the visuals to life. So I just thought that was an apt, literally from the horse's mouth, so. Or not literally.
It's clear that he knows what he's doing. The wide-angle lens thing is the thing that I find the most surprising about this choice.
The closeness to subject, or the long lens in general?
The fact that he's shooting the future on a wide lens, like or a wider lens than the
I didn't expect
past.
that. I thought it was a long lens film all the way through, and then I started to notice these wide angles when I was watching. I was like, whoa. All right.
Well, I mean, you and I both know this. A wide-angle lens is going to cost the movie more money than a long lens will.
Yes.
Because you're going to end up having to pay for a lot more stuff in front of camera.
Yeah, and think of it. People don't think about vertical space too, because ceilings. You have to have huge ceilings, which means you have to have huge builds.
Yeah, and also wide-angle lens makes it a lot harder to hide like the pageantry that you've created for the quote-unquote wide of the scene. So like for instance, like he gets pretty tight in that police station when they're trying to manage Phoenix's first breakout of the cryo chamber, and like, you know, when he goes to the phone booth and everything else. They shoot a lot of close-ups there, but there's like 20 people in that scene, and they're all in outfits, and they have all these computer monitors and stuff that are probably not green screened. So, like, it's surprising that he's on such a wide lens in those scenes because they cost more money. And maybe that's the point. You know, maybe it's like, I'm going to show you what I'm spending my money on. But, you know, it's just as a person who's had to be thrifty my whole career, as have you, that's where you have to get a little creative about when do you show your wides? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, what do I really need to see to sell the...
And this thing loves wides. This thing is all wide all day for most part.
I mean, I thought they must have spent quite a bit of money on those cars.
Yeah,
those cars
worked with
couldn't
General
have been cheap.
Motors for the film to like custom fit these like fucking these cars, like everything they're driving. And anytime we see an interior, every time we see an exterior, it's usually a treated car. There's no actual cars that make sense. They even put like there's like electric cars and stuff. I think that's just a sound design thing. But like when Simon Phoenix gets in the cop car, he's driving around and it makes this like like little engine.
No kidding, right? Like a little whine. By the way, again, and I'm not trying to dunk on this guy, but like this movie also brought to mind Minority Report.
Oh yeah.
Because it has Minority Report is doing a lot of the same work. You know what I mean? Like trying to create a future, like has all like car stuff and like, you know, guns and crime and like how do you make a sanitized world and is it worth the cost and all that stuff, right? Yeah. And that movie feels, I mean, maybe there's more money. I'm not sure. I didn't look into it. And certainly there's more Spielberg, but that movie feels like so much more epic, and I don't think it is.
No,
right?
It's about it's. Yeah,
like
there's a
really.
whole director piece on efficiency of budget. Like I could talk about this for days.
We talk about it a lot. Yeah,
going to right now.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Because you're absolutely right, and I think we both know that because we've both had.
I'm not helping
We've had
you.
to direct for a budget. Yeah. It's fine. It's an apt point. I think that we see also in the future, as a part of the future, one of the characters that we need to acknowledge is Huxley, which is Sandra Bullock. Who is an anomaly in this world. We see a slip of the camera's tactics as characters become more sympathetic to the ways of the past. With Benjamin, what's his name? Bratt. He literally is wearing, at the end, Dennis Leary rebellion clothes, even though he's a cop. And it's like, all right, I guess that's cool. I guess you're wholly into the revolution now. And that all happened off camera. So we see, I think, slips of camera tactics at specific points, noticeably with Huxley, though. That's the only one I'll mention really today, which is that there's a whole Dutch sequence that occurs at the end when they're making the final stand and like making their final approach to Simon Phoenix. It cuts between Huxley and Spartan. Did you notice this moment? Spartan and Huxley are talking, and they're literally talking about like the ways of the past and how the ways of the past are very much like, I see the point of violence. Like sometimes you got to punch somebody, and she actually fights for herself, and there's an action sequence where she's like kicking ass and using the same brutish tactics that Spartan does, because no one in this world hits other people.
Right.
It's done entirely in Dutch. It's like bizarre. It's definitely first director thing. It's like when someone figures out like what Dutching the angle does to the visual plane. Everyone goes like, oh, that's fucking cool. And they're like, let's just shoot the whole sequence that way. It just cuts back and forth, and they're just standing there completely tilted. And it's just a very big offer in this Hollywood film.
It's so rare that a Dutch angle doesn't feel like a loud fart in a movie.
Yeah, it kind of... it's hard. Not bad. It's not bad.
It's loud, though.
It's loud.
It's a loud decision.
It's loud.
Yeah.
You said it there.
Yeah, it's a really loud decision.
So, I just wanted to point that out because let's talk about Huxley a little bit more. Her introduction is her driving in a utopia, basically. It's at the top of the movie. It's like 7 minutes in. You see beautiful landscape. Santa Monica Boulevard is empty. There's greens in the color palette. It's very bright. We're in a car and very close to her face, so we see the discussion with Warden Smithers. We see her on a tablet. Her car is very sterile and futuristic and plenty of minimalistic design sense, which is not organic. But like the outside world is kind of organic. That's our opening image. I think that if I had to pin it down, I think one of the only attempts in the movie to portray the coexistence of these two visual aesthetics is not here. It's not trying to say one is haranguing another. It's just saying here is a world. It's kind of reminiscent to the opening image of just like streets being on fire. So I think that's important, is that what we know of the past at this point, 8 minutes into the movie, is past very bad, on fire. Future kind of cool, right? Kind of cool. That's what it's kind of setting, so it can then debunk that mythos. Right? That's how movies do.
I mean, the past looked like horrible. Like, it's shocking how bad it is. And then, like, there's one stretch of drive in Century City that looks like you're in this weird idyllic, like, water park.
Oh, yeah.
And they found it, and that's where they shot almost all of
that's
this
where
stuff.
you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very beautiful.
The rich people place, which is, there you go. And so... that's one thing I want to put in your mind. The other is, of course, as I mentioned, her character in a nutshell, like her arc as a character is just she wants something new to happen. And by new, she really means old, because she says, like, quote, what I wouldn't do for some action. And then her entire, like, her office, her house is all knickknacks from the past. It's all stuff that, like, wasn't it great? Like, look at that poster of an action hero. That's cool. So let's look at how we show Huxley. She's this kind of weird dichotomy. Let's mention it. So we shoot her a lot with wide lenses, and this sequence in particular, there's no Dutching, except for the moment where we see there's not really diagonals in anyone other than Simon Phoenix and John Spartan in the movie. This sequence in particular does have some handheld, which I thought was interesting because it's all car stuff. And like when you think of like sleek dystopic future, and you're driving in an electric car, talking on a tablet, and it auto-driving, and you're looking at these landscapes that have, like, sweeping architecture that looks like it's from the future. Do you think handheld, or do you think on rails?
I mean, right? I would like to think on rails.
Not
but,
the choice that this guy made.
Yeah, the Hunger Games also did more of a handheld long lens thing, which I hated. So that reinforces what you're saying.
And as I mentioned, the organic colors are mixed in with other shots of cyan and gray. So in Demolition Man, basically what I'm coming to the point is she's the only character who seems not have made up her mind, and the two sides are battling, literally in camera and in her mind, I guess, of the past and the present.
She's basically... She's basically the Little Mermaid in Demolition Man.
Yeah,
like she like has a treasure trove full of stuff she's gotten from the past that's probably contraband, and like is in love with like an old, probably deadly.
Neat? You know, here's the thing. I'm gonna actually. Truly, though, if you want to be specific, especially with the seashell
I'm excited. Yes,
imagery,
here we go.
I think John Spartan is the Little Mermaid of Demolition Man. Sylvester Stallone.
I just hope we continue to argue who's the Little Mermaid of Demolition Man.
Yeah, you know,
because that's a podcast for you.
Yeah, that's all right. It really isn't, but okay.
I know.
All right, let's talk about 2032 Underground. How we treat Dennis Leary, baby. So real quickly again. A lot of long lenses and wide lenses. Everything's kind of 50-50. It's kind of married, which I thought was kind of... Either is like, not really a great point in my theory, or also an intentional thing to marry the two. Because it's definitely like taking a stopwatch to it. It's because I think there's so much action, and there's so... We only spend 10 minutes in the underground is the other thing. In a movie that's an hour and 55 minutes, we only spend 10 minutes there. And I thought it was a lot bigger of a part of the movie. I don't know if you didn't get that experience, but I remembered it a lot more. It's only 10 minutes, which is crazy.
It's because they have like two of the most memorable things that happens in the movie happens in the underground. Yeah. One of them is the rat burger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And also, you finally meet Dennis Leary, who you've kind of like...
You just see.
I'm sure he was. Yeah, you're like.
I mean, the first time we saw him is he's looking at Spartan, who's like beating up a bunch of his guys, and he's like, "What a fucking hero!" So he like, yeah. We've only seen him once up to this point, and yeah. So it's like a small subset, and it's not as loud as the first 7 minutes of the film, but it's definitely reminiscent, and here's why. Dutch is back in play. Diagonals are dominant. Handheld is not really there. It's more placed in the Simon and Underground scenes, but so that's the one hole, but like organic colors are mixed together. So basically, once again, cyan versus warm. So we're seeing anytime they're flirting with the mixing of the elements, cyan versus warm, handheld is interplaying with static camera, diagonals versus flat space, Dutch angle versus more upright, and long lens versus wide lens. This is the conversation that's being had about the camera when they're talking about these worlds, is what I'm saying. So like Huxley, it's a mix of these shooting strategies, and it's clear in this case it's much more reminiscent of the past than the future. When we look at the underground, there's literally... the grime on the walls. There's a lack of sterility in the overworld that we get from the overworld. We only really spend 10 minutes there, but they collectively, the underground and the beginning of the movie, is 17 minutes of the runtime of the film, and that's kind of a hefty amount. And they are the most similar looking things in the movie. So
can I ask you, like, okay, so and I think this question is on point for where you want to go. Mm-hmm. So like. You've done a really nice job here of explaining the techniques the director used to differentiate the two worlds.
Yeah.
And you've implied, because you've compared Huxley, and also I think a little bit because you've connected...
And I'm a scamp. I'm a lovable scamp. So
you've connected Simon Phoenix's antics to sort of the past, like the way the past is shot. Mm-hmm. Why do you think they didn't do some of that for John Spartan? Why doesn't he generate camera changes with his behavior?
That is
right?
interesting.
Isn't that weird?
I think it's what it's supposed to be doing is they need to talk, like, if I'm going to take myself out, because you're already seeing kind of what I was arguing or my leading up to the point. And without burying the lead, I definitely think you have a point there. And I think the real reason is probably because they're like, well, you got to have like a home base of a movie. It's got to like be normal for blockbusters. You can't just be Dutch angles the whole movie, right?
It's like they haven't seen Highlander. Highlander does that shit all the time.
Yeah, it's not that kind of movie. It's like, let's get comfortable. Right. Let's do a Batman. Let's do a, one of these fucking, like, yeah. So they chose the vanilla path because that's the path that's well trodden. And that's probably why. But absolutely right. Nailed it. If we are to believe that the visual strategy infringes upon other elements of the films in this way, in other words, you're crafting a visual strategy that says, this is what the past looks like, this is what the future of this timeline looks like, here's them at war. When you're trying to show that, why wouldn't you do that with your main character? He is literally a quote-unquote peacekeeper, and we're going to get into that. He's kind of. He's really just a maniac. He literally says at multiple points, like, gotta send a maniac to catch a maniac. They both know that they're just at war. They're just a war machine. They're literally demolition men. And this other society is just unready for it and has no frame of reference for violence itself. And I think that it's not like any one character is like, I understand that the balance is the thing. No one is saying that. Everyone is like, it's me versus them. So we're not who's doing it is us, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The viewer is the centrist in this. We're the ones saying like, but don't you see? Balance and compromise is the answer.
For sure.
No one in this movie is saying that.
This movie
until
definitely
the very end, and it's very not believable.
100%.
Because he's like,
this movie
don't hurt people, but I mean sometimes hurting people's good. Like it's not. It does not.
He's very wishy-washy. The movie does assume a status quo. Mm-hmm. Like it leans pretty heavy on the status quo. Yeah, as like the way of viewing both of these worlds. Mm-hmm. They're both absurd. Like, but the past is absurd, and also the future is absurd.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point. So I want to talk about Simon Phoenix a little bit, just because he's like the last piece. Which is, I want to open with a conversation at the very beginning that it goes missed. Like when I've talked to people about Demolition Man, they like don't remember this sequence. And it's not that I noticed it in particular, but then when I started thinking about it, I was like, oh my God, it's right there in the movie. And also the screenplay does things like at one point he says like, I forget what Simon Phoenix says, but he says if I didn't like referencing something in the scene, like if I didn't have it, I would lose my head. And then he says, I'll remember that. And then the end of the film, he says, you have a good memory, and his head gets lopped off. So it's like they're asking us to do little small plant payoffs that frankly, I don't know if Demolition Man deserves, but it is still written with that kind of approach, right? And here's a conversation. It's literally the first conversation of the movie. And it's the conversation between Simon and Spartan in the past. It's like, you're under arrest. That's Spartan. He's like, arrest? Shit. And you're trespassing. Where are the passengers? Oh, yes, the passengers. And then he gestures all around the building, which is like a plant and payoff for later when he says, like, I just put the people and the hostages in the building so that when we blew it up, they would be able to frame you because they were already dead. So he gestures, he basically is telling Spartan, like, well, they're, fuck you. Passengers are gone. See, I told the city. I said, look, nobody comes down here. Postmen figured it out. Policemen figured it out. But goddamn bus drivers just wouldn't listen. I mean, you can extrapolate what he's talking about there. He's basically saying that the government is basically telling them, like, posting notices of stuff like eviction and like you gotta get out of here, or like the postman figured it out, meaning we're getting mail, we're getting one stream of oppression on one side, and also the policemen figured it out. In other words, you choose to police us, but the goddamn bus drivers just wouldn't listen. In other words, all of the benefits of society you have not given to us out here in this part because it's too crime-like, I guess. So it's basically Phoenix's MO, right? I read a lot of think pieces that argue that basically like you said, the Joker, or there's representation of black representation in Hollywood, and they definitely have validity. But I think that there's something that he's actually saying here. These think pieces do not acknowledge that he actually does have a political point, or at least he's arguing that he does. One can definitely say that he just is making shit up, and just like, I don't know, what's a good argument? And he's just gaslighting the shit. But I just don't think so. This is the opening image of a character in a film. You don't open with gaslighting unless your point is that he's gaslighting the whole time, which he isn't. That's not the arc of this movie. This movie is much more about whether or not he is going to get demolitioned, I guess. I don't know. It's just not that dense of a movie. It's not that complex. So he does have a political statement. And that's his philosophy of society. I think that's interesting. He's also, remember, a rapist and a murderer and a tax evasionist, but that's all, not necessarily adds credence to my theory. It's just...
Yeah, it's circumspect. We're not going to count that against him right now.
Yeah, I'm just saying he does have a political point. And we show that, again, talking politically about this anti-PC stuff, we see a lot of the future being incompetent. Like the opening image of the 2032 rebellion is a graffiti bot spraying "Life is Hell" on a commercial district like marble and concrete welcome sign for a place called Ethical Plaza. And it immediately is erased by some supposedly like anti-graffiti tech, showing how stupid the protest is because it was up for like 3 seconds, right? And also the robot malfunctions, showing that they're not even resourceful. The rebels are not good at making robots. They need help, basically.
We're all very fortunate that you are doing this retro summary, because none of that is clear when you're watching it. It's true.
Really? It's true, though, right? Okay.
It's true. Yeah, it's definitely there. It's just that, like,
I thought this was like the boring part. I thought this is just shit I had to get out of the way.
No. It's actually like I found this particular point that you're making really profound. Like, oh yeah, the government's eradicated the possibility of protesting. That's but like in a smiley way.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't think about it because you're like, what the hell is going on, and who are these people? Like this is a very poor moment for the director. Because that's actually a really interesting satire that would have added some depth to the movie, but it kind of gets fumbled.
Yeah, it gets fumbled because here's what he does with it. And it doesn't, like, to your point, it doesn't add to more mining of that thought. Because basically it just takes the bumbling, like, the future is just out of touch with reality. Because the SAPD, San Angeles, police department, time and time again are shown as incompetent themselves. Like when society's laws and the automated like demerit system like were established, it clearly made them unequipped to deal with any form of violence. Or like when the first 3 murder death kills occur, like people throw up. When they get access to Phoenix...
Rob Schneider throws up.
Rob Schneider throws up, that's true.
Rob Schneider throws up.
And when they can't get access to Phoenix's files... Huxley in particular blames the computer.
Yes.
Like, because it's like an
accurate
interface where you talk to it, and it's like, are you getting a virus again? And it's just like, what the fuck?
Me?
Do you think do you think that's a person? Do you know what computer? All right, fuck it. Like it's
but the computer is an AI, right? It does respond.
It does respond, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's making any
weird
thoughts. It's just behaving, doing operations. Answers questions.
We should have known that this is an inept police department.
Yeah.
Just for naming this crime murder, death, kill.
Yeah, exactly.
Because what? I'm sure that everyone had a lot of yucks over the last like 20 years or whatever, 27 years. Because I couldn't believe that. Like I just could not accept it. I was like, murder, death, kill. What the fuck? Who thinks that's a good piece of writing? That's horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. Why did they say that?
The other thing is that on top of everything, the demerit system, the automation of it all, the sleep at the wheel, very WALL-E-like, right? It's very much like WALL-E.
But not smart like WALL-E. It's all very stupid.
It's all very
and
stupid,
irritating.
But the director was smart enough to include things like everything, all the Simon's crimes for the first half of the movie are presented mostly through CCTV footage via the police officers watching it happen. So we have the feeling of a panopticon-esque like police state, but it's not an enforceable police. They're not ruffians and tyrants. They're just, well, I'm going to go more into that because I think it's the difference between an Orwellian and Huxleyan dystopia. But like the basic thing is that they're two different police states. But it is a police state. It has eyes. It watches you like Big Brother.
They can be anywhere and see anything. Yeah. That's a police state.
And I thought a notable moment is in the first like bigger crime that Phoenix does when he gets out, after he does his murder, death, kills, and breaks out of the cryo place. He steals a policeman's baton, which is kind of looks like a baseball bat, and that prompts him to sing "And the Home of the Brave," as a kind of satirical quip about American freedom and traditionalism, like singing at the beginning of ball games, for example. It's like he's doing a bit to being like, I'm going to attach myself with what America's represented, the home of the brave, the land of the free. Right? He's doing that because he thinks it's funny, because he's looking around at this world and he's like, oh, this is stifling. This is no one's happy here. So Simon cues in immediately to what's wrong with society. It takes Stallone like 30 minutes for him to be like, what? Oh, you don't have sex? It's bizarre how fast Simon struggles. He does not struggle for a second. He's just like, yep, okay.
No, he figured it out. Yeah, he was right on the case. Yeah, for sure. So, it's really interesting. He is very adaptable. Like he knows what to do kind of immediately, and like I'm sure somebody out there is being like, well, yeah, because he was programmed to in his like rehabilitation. I don't know if that totally satisfies the fact that he just seems like just tonally comfortable. Yeah, like this singing thing is such a not villain thing to do.
I mean, I think there's a reason that Dennis Rodman modeled his like look a little bit for a while after this movie came out.
Oh, I guess he did. I guess that's true.
Yeah, right after this movie, he dyed his hair and stuff. I think it was like part of it's solidarity, but he kind of cued into that weird kind of Joker spirit, like you were talking about, like that weird,
a little bit
weird, like fuck everything, chaos is kind of awesome, but also there's an intelligence behind it, like there's a real intelligence behind, I think, what Phoenix is doing. I don't think he's just a dummy, just lying for, japes.
No, he's not just like an unleashed typhoon or something. Mm-hmm. He's definitely like has opinions and insights and like can see the angles better than really other people do.
He's about it, and and like, also a criminal. But
right, Mike and I just did that BioShock episode of One-Upsmanship.
Right,
he's kind of like Frank Fontaine, like from that game, who's like kind of. He's sort of like Frank Fontaine's a businessman. I'll put that in quotes, but basically he's the only person who's like a criminal mastermind in this city, and because he's there, the city falls apart. Like he's just the one. He's like he sees the angle, he exploits it. Like, and I feel like that's what Phoenix can do. Like he's sort of above it all.
It's just not a tactic that I would assume. That goes along with someone who's in competition for being the titular Demolition Man. And I think that Spartan, who is the actual Demolition Man, is more apt to that kind of like spirit of absolute like authoritative force. What we know of Spartan is that he caught 1,000 people in 3 years. 1,000 in 3 years.
That's crazy. Yeah,
and we see video footage of some of his arrests when we're doing like the playback in the police station. And it's I want to dissect that sequence a little bit. It's a shot of him punching a guy's lights out, quickly cutting to him subduing 2 criminals by putting both of their hands behind their backs at once, which is it's kind of humorous. And then the last is him carrying a small kid out of a fire. When a reporter asks to interview the kid says, "Fuck you, lady." It's like, so we just have like a 3-shot montage of him being like, he's a renegade cop and look how fucking cool he is. And even the kids he saves are fucking cool. It's like so stupid. The future sees him as like kind of a muscle-bound grotesque, but that's what we're presented with, him just being awesome, right? He's just a king, right?
I don't know. I mean, but he's
a brute.
Yeah,
as they say.
We think he's dangerous.
He's very
right?
dangerous in not the same way that Simon Phoenix is, who's just willy-nilly doing crimes. But as we'll see, in order to test if the electric batons in the future work, once he's like fully suited as like a police officer now, he casually places it on the head of some random guy in the crowd in order to test if it works. And then he says, "It works," and it's like a joke. And then he just walks on, and no one cares. He doesn't care about justice. He only cares about the fighting between the war of police versus the criminals of his time. He is well attuned to the idea of fighting a war against an enemy. That's what his skill set is. It's not about justice, really. We're not presented with him. There's only 1 or 2 times that he actually makes a plea for justice. And the one time is he's kind of like bumbling around. He's like, "I don't know, it just doesn't feel right." Is his like, it's the first time that he sees the underground, and then the underground is stealing, and we reveal that they've just been stealing like food. And he's like, so he goes to Cocteau and he says, "Hey, like, I'm cool with violence. You know, violence isn't hurting people isn't great, but you know, like sometimes it is, but you know, like not when they're just trying to eat food." That's as political as he gets, which once again, way less political than what Simon Phoenix has to say.
It also didn't necessarily feel like a thing he would believe.
Mm-hmm.
Like he doesn't. John Spartan manages to be by the end like pretty thoughtful, and he's not that when the movie starts. And I don't think it's because he grew. Like, would you say that he grew in the course of this movie?
It's the future that's the one that needs to grow, and that's kind of my
right.
That's kind of my next point, or the conclusions that I'm building off of these strategies and presentations, is that there's something fundamentally kind of broken about this film, because it almost intentionally paints a landscape of corruption in both times. Whether it wants you to believe that or not, it's doing that. In 1996, the police cannot contain a civil threat. In 2032, civilians can't contain a governmental threat. Spartan's is basically branching these 2 worlds, and in the movie's eyes, he returns clarity and justice to the future, which is like the common blockbuster theme of balance or moderation between 2 opposing principles yields the best results. That's centrism, and that's what's king in 1990s, right? That's what's king now. That's what's Hollywood. That's blockbusters, right? So what conclusions can we pull from this, especially in terms of the protagonists and the antagonists of the films and how they kind of presented it? I was looking at this movie and picking apart the stylistic approach of how camera and art presents heroes and villains, and I realized that there's this diametric opposition between the visual strategies of the protagonist and the antagonist, right? And this is usually a typical thing in blockbusters because they are each other's foils. At the heart of the theme of the movie is usually something they fundamentally disagree about, and therefore we feel that the framing, the editing, and the lighting should kind of carry that in tone. Now, this movie, not so much, because there's a greater villain in a way, or at least it goes out of its way and it makes it kind of like the home base problem, which is that, and it occupies more screen time. The future and its overtly, I guess, PC ways, it's not the highest stakes in the movie. It's not, there's a guy out there who's a maniac and he's killing people, but it's definitely the majority of the thematic mining that the movie does. So this made me think, about what kind of dystopias we're presented with in 1996 versus 2030. So 1996, and I kind of talked about this a little before, but let me tell you what I mean. 1996 is Orwellian because the people are too terrified to resist. Everyone is like, there doesn't seem to be a lot of the population around, right? Everyone it's in darkness. You get the feeling that things are on fire. The police are militarized, so they're just too terrified. The city is an outright rebellion, basically, or at least at Simon Phoenix's outright rebellion against that society. We don't know about other parts of America or the world, but we know that there's that police state here. Now the future is Huxleyan.
It's implied that there's whole sections of the country that are basically no longer under the heel of the government.
Exactly. And now the future is Huxleyan or Huxlan, I don't know.
Yeah.
But the people blithely welcome their subjugation. And that's true about like Brave New World. Convinced that it's the best way, right? But then they're left with this empty, like, kind of place in their soul, right? That's kind of, look no further than Lenina Huxley, the character who's named after this trope. So what I'm trying to get to is it's a centrist movie. It's made for a centrist, highly consumptive, ethically lethargic Clinton-era society. Basically, what the movie says is that if you root for John Spartan, you're rooting for a society, one version of society's past against its future. Both worlds are unstable. They're literally made of fire or they're cold as ice and steel. Mashing them together doesn't yield a better world, in my opinion. At least, at best, it like just converts one to the other, right? So it's kind of presenting two versions of just like the worst conclusions of humanity. Basically, we're fucked in our futures. We can't really settle the balance. And centrism wants to hold that up as a virtue. Like it says, if you just do the middle thing, it'll be fine. Right? But I mean, both worlds are on fire or absolutely dead.
It's an argument for the 90s.
Yeah,
is what
exactly.
it is. It's like, hey man, weren't things good in the 90s? I mean, yeah, they kind of were for white people, and also America as a whole was doing probably a little better.
Yeah.
And so therefore this movie has the arrogance to argue for status quo. Let's do that.
So
when it's like, why did you make a movie then? I don't understand that.
That's what I thought was super broken about this movie, and that was my main point. I do have an auxiliary thought that you probably have guessed based off things that I randomly decided to talk about, which is that I thought that the framing of the characters kind of nod toward, for us as the audience, if this is how movies work, what's good and what's bad. And if it weren't for all the killing and obvious evil in Simon Phoenix, he absolutely is the only person left at the end. Dennis Leary even says at one point, I'm like not a leader. They like go out of their way to show like there is no hope. There's no one who's actually going to take the reins of power here. It's going to be Spartan. Spartan is the only one who's going to save us.
It's going to be Spartan. Absolutely.
Yeah, like, otherwise, they should have said, Dennis Leary, you take the wheel. Spartan's just the thug who gets a thing done. You're going to say that your society is going to be built by a man called Demolition Man? Whatever. Yeah. Whatever. Hold on.
He doesn't even care about the fate of his daughter.
Right. He's
what?
Yeah.
He never even looks in on her. What?
So Simon Phoenix is the only one who's not an Orwellian or a Huxleyan archetype. He's the only one. Friendly, too afraid to leave. Everyone else too Huxleyan to want to change. And the only character who consistently offers that alternative, has a plan, and can see the mechanisms of society and how they're broken from the start of the movie, and seeing that it's not a marriage of problems of the old and the new, but rather a systemic issue from the society itself. And his name literally means freedom and rebirth. The hero of Demolition Man might be Simon Phoenix.
Could be. Also, you could see Simon Phoenix as a metaphor for the internet if you really wanted to.
Why?
Because the one thing that he's actually good at doing, is, aside from making everybody focus on him, which he's good at doing, that
is hacking.
Is hacking, and also collecting people, bringing opinions together. He's very good at that, right? And sort of using what you might call...
Immediately, when he's like, I got a problem to solve, immediately thinks about how... Like, obviously, John Spartan doesn't have that option because it's not like they got, like, a bunch of frozen cops. But, like...
Right.
He does have... Like, he immediately thinks of, like, well, I gotta, like, outsource. Like, I gotta build an army. It takes a village.
Right. And he gets them. You know what I mean? Like, he gets an army, and he gets them all to sort of think alike. He radicalizes them, if you will, and gives them their little jobs, and he creates basically a rage mob that is used to sort of undermine the credibility of the people that created it. He just serves as sort of an internet culture meme, if you want to make that case.
Yeah,
there's probably more if I spend any time thinking about it.
Right. And I don't want people to be like, Abe thinks that Simon Phoenix is a hero. I think that there's things that they present that make me go, the movie thinks he's a hero, though. Like, in a way, except for all the violence and the crime. That's the one thing. You're never going to get under that. He is a rapist and a murderer. So, hero for the film? Yes, I'm making that argument. Hero in general? No. Hell no.
No, not a real life hero. But
you can go draw some plants or something. Like, there's so many other things to do than murder and kill. Like, just tax evasion even. Like, don't do that. I'm not saying that.
Man, you really laying in on the tax evasion jokes.
I mean, it's there.
Yeah.
And it's
you love it so much. You love it so much. Yeah, I first of all, well done. I enjoyed this argument quite a bit. I think it's interesting. I still think it's a failure of the director's part to not use Spartan as a kind of visual and creative synthesis.
You see the thinking is there. And it's kind of like
but he didn't
a missed opportunity.
He didn't actually do it. Yeah.
I mean, he did it with other characters. He just didn't do it with one character. And that's what I think in the middle of the podcast we were talking about. Like, I think that is because a studio would be like, these are weird visual strategy. Like, I don't care. Why did you film it this way? You know? But he's trying to hold on to his integrity, and he's just getting beaten down by the studio is what I think.
Right.
Or
I'm sure that's true. 100%.
I think that's probably the case. I don't know. Neither of us know.
No, I don't know.
He could have just not thought about it. That would be bizarre if he's like, okay, Simon Phoenix needs to be shot like this. Okay, Huxley needs to be shot like this. Okay, so John Spartan, your main character, the Demolition Man. How do you shoot him? We'll just wing it. That just seems weird to me.
Well, I think you have to sort of acknowledge that the movie, according to movie rules, the protagonist of the film is technically Huxley.
Yes.
Right? Like, because she's the one that changes. She's the one that actually goes on a narrative journey. Because Spartan doesn't, and Phoenix doesn't, and definitely that guy from Beetlejuice doesn't. So
he was basically the same role. I mean, let's just be honest.
I loved that he was in the movie. I was like, oh man, this guy's in it. I love it.
Like, oh yeah.
Also, the warden from
super
Shawshank.
Super fresh with his kimono and
his weird two-tone hair that they made fun of.
His two-tone. They just love dunking on the guy.
They love dunking on stuff.
Yeah,
this movie really thought it was funny.
Yeah, it's very like it's because of the centrism of the movie. It's being made for this like lethargic audience that just wants to like, and I mean, I'm not saying it isn't still here, in America and many places in the world. It's just the idea that it's just like, yeah, those hoity-toity elites. Yeah, let's own the libs,
I mean, it's such I don't like the fact that the movie decided to be a political movie because I don't think it earned the right to do it.
Yeah, I mean, they're right.
Like,
if people were acting like that and using demerits for swearing, it's like, well, all right. Well, but no one's asking for that.
Right.
No one's
it's a scarecrow. It's a scarecrow. That's what I hate about it.
Yeah, stop making this point. But I mean, it's also a blockbuster movie. It's just it's just a load of fun, right?
Well, yeah, it's a blockbuster movie, but like they spent a lot of time on this. Right?
Yeah.
They spent a lot of fucking time on this. This
the
and
whole
the
movie
seashells.
Is this shit,
Yes.
Dunking on Pizza Hut and Taco Bell.
Taco Bell, boy oh boy. They went in on that, man.
Yeah, they did. Well, you know that there's 2 versions, right? Everyone knows this.
Yes. Also,
Okay.
I know that Burger King was the first pick, and they said no, and then McDonald's, and then Taco Bell.
And then it was Taco Bell and Pizza Hut because it's owned by the same company. So they could work with one company, have multiple versions depending on the audience. Which is crazy because if you watch the Pizza Hut cut, you haven't seen that, I don't think.
I have not seen it, no.
They literally, it's just a few inserts in the movie, but if you watch that cut, which is actually, I thought was the premiere cut online at this point. I definitely saw one earlier this year when we rewatched it. But yeah, they literally overdub. Like the actor is mouthing Taco Bell, but it's ADR with Pizza Hut.
That's awful.
It's so stupid, dude.
I'm sure Sly was
so
I'm not
dumb.
saying pizza. I'm not saying
Pizza
that.
Hut? You know, like you just can't do
saying
ADR.
that.
God, I wish I was still making sketches. I'd make Stallone can't do ADR sketch.
That's a
I
good
don't even know if
sketch.
it's true. I just like it doing his voice.
But it's a funny sketch. Yeah,
You know what's
totally
also weird
understand.
is like there's been tweets about this and shit, but just to get out of the way, if you've been living under a rock, the whole COVID-19 parallels are insane. Just to pull out, if you haven't seen the film recently, there's a shit ton of stuff in this movie that is done in 2032 that Huxley at one point says because there was a lot of like pandemics and stuff. Like there's the way in which they behave that's very strange. Like they don't shake hands. And a few of them are the necessity of working remotely. In particular, workers often communicate over like a Zoom app. Like we see that the Cocteau has like a conference table and it's just a bunch of heads that like bob and sway. Even though they're literally in like rooms down the hall, it's just an aspect of society, teleconferences. They panic bought toilet paper is something that someone pointed out at some point because there's no toilet paper in this world. It's just like weirdly relevant. Like I don't know what that means or says, but the whole 3 seashells thing is like, why did we just have a toilet paper thing? That's weird. Self-driving cars. Tesla just had their huge test and had like that viral video. Schwarzenegger becoming president was relevant, and granted that was relevant earlier in the 2000s when he actually became took political office. But just the idea that before or after he became governor of California in 2020, the U.S. president was known for being the star of a reality TV show. There's just like, all right, weird calls. Demolition Man.
It's stupid that Demolition Man managed to get anything right.
Why? Why should it get anything right? Why did I name like 5 things just now?
Yeah, just putting Rob Schneider as Rob Schneider as assistant.
Right.
In the movie alone should have put it like in the "this is unwatchable now" category.
He's all right in it. He's all
fine.
right.
He's doing his thing.
Yeah, he's actually kind of one of the more endearing roles I've ever seen because they don't like make a meal out of him. You know,
he gets one big bit.
He's gone.
He gets one bit.
He gets one bit, and it's a fine bit. I like the call out that like the secretary of the office would also take the 911 calls because they're so infrequent that they're treating it like customer service. You know,
right? I mean,
so there's not even a department for answering 911 calls.
Rob Schneider overachieved. Can I just go on record and say he overachieved?
Sure.
Like, you know what I mean? Like Kevin Nealon never did anything, and he was much funnier than Rob Schneider.
I mean, he made a career.
He was in stuff. Yeah, he was in stuff. But anyway,
we can say that about Rob Schneider. He exists.
I'm
not going to take a hard stance on him either way. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't need to continue.
So just before we wrap this up, like I get very frustrated by movies that choose to argue for the status quo. Like I find that very frustrating.
Now, the status quo of the movie or the status quo of what the filmmaker's saying?
Both.
Like from our perspective. Okay, because I was saying
mostly from our perspective. Mostly from our perspective.
Yeah, like saying like. Just stay the course kind of movies.
Right, and it's because it's like, no, improve the world a little bit. Like, you're making a movie, and a movie always has a story, and the story always carries cultural values in it. The cultural values shouldn't be things are good the way they are.
Yeah, and Demolition Man is definitely about, let's take a moment and look at, like, sometimes we got to take for granted that we can spit and smoke and fuck in the right way.
Sure, right. Not brain fuck. It's
all very normative. All very normative.
Yeah, by the way, Sly Stallone takes off the helmet when he's enjoying the sex, right? He's enjoying sex with Sandra Bullock. Yeah. He takes it off, and then, like, has a clumsily attempts to kiss her. But, like, why doesn't he finish before he talks to her about this is weird? When he's enjoying it. That's, you know what I mean? Like, I thought that was strange.
Like, wait, you're saying, like, why didn't he come? Is that what you're asking? I don't know.
Yeah,
Adam,
but,
I know.
No, but, like, okay, isn't it very clear that it's working?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Do we agree on that? It's working.
It's done in this very, like... Man, it's
the most video artist
how,
part of the movie.
Sexuality during the 90s was presented, especially, like, being cis male, like, it's fucked all over, man. Like, there's some aspects of cis male people don't get, like, he's like, like, all of his posturing that he does,
it was
because
really awkward.
She's like being a little bit bold by saying let's have sex, and he's like, whoa, this is like, he can't deal with it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, boy, like, why are all of 90 heroes boys? Like, it's also on TV. If you watch, like they all act like teenagers. It's fucking silly. And then, like, yeah, also it seems impossible if he's, like, about to come, and then he's like,
no, let's stop this.
I don't think we're supposed to believe that, because this is all for, it's kind of like a PG rating, or what is it? It's R, because there's like there's straight up F-bombs. Yeah, what am I talking about? They dislodge a head, but like, it's still that, like, vanilla shit, right? So with that vanilla shit comes along with it this concept that you're gonna be like, okay, but let's just say that he's, like, starting to feel something down there or something weird like that. Like, that's how they justified it. Like, that wasn't him reaching orgasm, that was him getting aroused.
Right.
So it's not, yeah.
I understand, and I'm not trying to be like a dirty boy. It just felt.
I want you to bring up Stallone's cum all the time.
Your wish may be granted, my friend, because that's what my director piece is going to be all about.
Oh, right.
Pivoting right to Sly Seaman.
Seaman.
No, but like,
I did make a GIF on my Twitter of just the faces he makes during.
Yeah, they're really
sequence.
Uncomfortable.
They're really uncomfortable. Man.
I didn't understand why, like he's actually kind of open-minded. Like, I know he's like
aspects that are fine.
He got weirdly prudish about it. It's like, well, why don't you see what it's like, man? You know what I mean? Before you, like, freak out. Like, why don't, like, you've said yes to having sex with this woman. She seems like, like, this seems like she knows what's going on and didn't feel the need to train you on it. So, and like, maybe hang in there.
Immediately turns to, like, but let's, like, do the real sex, though.
Right.
And then she's like, no. And he does the right thing and he leaves. But, like, also, he's like, really, like, let's break the law. I thought you were all about justice, dude. Nah. Not when it gets in the way of me having sex. Then I'm
or having a beer or a rat burger. Yeah. He by the end he kind of has the same point of view that Phoenix Smith has, where it's sort of like, this place is stupid. I don't have to do what they tell me to do, right? Like the captain of the police, the chief of police, or Shawshank Warden, as I'm going to call him.
Yeah, Shawshank Warden.
Shawshank Warden comes up and says, "You're under arrest," and he just kind of never acknowledges him. He's just kind of like,
he just walks by. Because that's what arrest. You do. I think it's funny. I think that's fine, because everything's silly. I do admire Spartan's ability to shit efficiently.
No kidding.
So especially in the movie, it's the first shit that he would take after he got out of the cryo freezing.
That's all the shit in his body. That's
so
as much as he's got.
I would assume that's like at the very least, like, a really weird shit, right? Because, like, a bunch of processes happen to all of your body, right?
Yeah,
and
I mean, it could be like silly string. Who the hell knows?
And they do a joke about him, like the demerit system spits out these little tiny squares, like Post-it notes, of like, you have been fined for saying fuck. And he only takes like 5 tiny squares. And that's when he feels he's like satisfied that he'll be able to wipe enough.
Yeah.
Fucking holy shit, John Spartan. That's some confidence. Walking into cryo shits with 5 tiny squares.
I mean, but he feels like a Marine, right? And the Marines teach you to use 1 square. Like, that's one of their things.
Just 1 square, you use every part of it.
He's like, well, I did just sleep for 30 years, so I'll get 5, I'll be fine.
Yeah, I want to be I don't want to be, but I'm just saying, imagine being a fly on the wall when he's taking his first cryo shit.
Imagine being a fly on the wall when somebody explains to him in private how the shells work. You know what I mean? Like, that's an embarrassing conversation.
The shells. It's, if they answer the shelves, it's like it's the who will they, won't they of Demolition Man. They can't break that rule. That would be jumping the shark.
If they make a sequel, they have to go to France or something and have something weirder than seashells,
yeah, they
right?
really got to blow up the show.
Yeah.
All right. I don't have anything else. Do you have anything else you want to?
I could do a whole separate hour of jokes about this movie, because this movie is bananas. But no, I feel your argument for the Orwellian, Huxleyan centrism of Demolition Man was
really bizarre.
elocuted.
In its own framework, it really does not give you the right hero or message. And I know that that's putting a lot of things on a stupid movie, but like, you're only doing like a few things,
It tells
There's
on
worse
itself.
movies out there, but this one's kind of beloved and cult followed. And I'm not saying don't enjoy the movie. I'm just saying, like, let's look at this political correctness, anti-nonsense, and also look at, but what are we rooting for? I mean, I understand where we're coming from it. I love whatever the tagline is, like, Phoenix is an old-fashioned criminal. We need an old-fashioned cop. But it's like, yeah, this is seeped in traditionalism for the 90s. That's what this movie is. It's rah, rah, rah.
I don't mind. I don't mind a viewpoint of a movie that is like, I mean, to a degree, that's like dated, or they made a case that may have been progressive at the time but now isn't. Like, I don't mind that. This is a movie that made an argument for things are good the way they are.
Yeah,
which is like basically never an answer. Like, that's never the answer.
Well, yeah, it's like
no matter
it's
when
never
you
the
are.
answer. Exactly right.
It's like, come on, man.
I think all films are inherently propagandist because they all serve a point.
Of course they are. Yeah.
But this one is actually almost literally propaganda in the way that we use the term more colloquially.
Right. It is. I totally agree.
Reaffirmation of the state,
Just my last comment about this movie. I felt so bad for everyone who wasn't a lead and the haircuts they had to get for this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Like those really high ear cups.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Like
they're gonna have like 3 really bad months figuring this out. It's
One day I'm
like horrible.
gonna make a film and it's gonna have like the craziest haircuts and I'm just gonna love it and everyone's gonna hate me and I'm gonna say, fuck that.
Why do movies always have a stupid future? Every time they do the future, it's stupid. Why is that?
Because having a future is a big offer. It's already like immediately a sci-fi film, and if you're gonna not make it conflicting, then why are you making a movie?
No, I'm sorry.
I think that
I should have been more specific. I mean, why do people always dress and look dumb in the future?
Yeah. I think it's a way of making fun of ourselves too, because it's like saying when we are the future of like the 50s looking at us, they're like, oh, look at these fuckers just wearing trash bags, or whatever.
Like the modern people in Hunger Games, and by modern I mean like the Metropolitan people, look like weird Victorian explosions of like pixie dust. They just look ridiculous. You know?
Yeah.
And like uncomfortable. It's like, oh, you don't look like you're comfortable.
They just took high art at the time and displaced that to the future. We've been doing that for years. We've been trying all of our shit. Yeah.
We've been trying. Looper had those weird, stupid ass hats. Remember those hats everybody wore in the future? Ugh.
Everything in the island was a fucking iPod. Like, it's that kind of shit. They're just like, oh, minimalism.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the thing we're doing now.
Still safer.
I don't really care about the stylistic approach. As long as it feels foreign enough and the people buy it, I'm like, all right. It's more of what you want to say. And this is not a movie that says anything of any note.
Not really. Definitely not.
So I'm kind of done with it. I still enjoy it. I still enjoy it for what it is. You know,
there's
let's blow this guy. Classic.
There's a chance I'll never see this again. There's a pretty good chance I'll never see it again.
It's crazy how it endures. Some things endure, and that's weird.
This one, it boggles the mind. I think nostalgia has a big part of it, because I watched it and thought, this is a very bad movie.
Yes.
So
having
that's
not
interesting.
seen it, you didn't share in that nostalgia. It definitely was. It's definitely a nostalgic thing.
Yeah,
I would say.
Definitely, no question.
Like all cult things are in some way.
But most times, cult things have like they were a little ahead of their time, or like they have an appeal that like
something makes it more relevant.
Yeah. This is
but
not
rare.
that.
That's rare.
Yeah, totally. Well done, sir.
Thank you for joining me on that stupid little journey.
My pleasure.
You're love you.
Love you too.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.